Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. We're going to get into part 2 of the Sabaton History for the Soldier of Three Armies. We did part 1 yesterday, we did the song the day before, and so we're going to get into part 2 today. I'm going to record and put out the reaction to a song off of their new album. The War to End All Wars, I believe, is the album. They put a thing out yesterday, and somebody had mentioned this in a comment for another video, or a couple of people had mentioned it, about them doing a more or less like a symphony version of their album. And that sounds incredibly intriguing to me. I kind of want to go hear what it's like. So I'm going to do some research into that. But today we're going to do part 2 of Soldier of Three Armies. Let's get into it.
This is the second part of a We're Doing It Over Skype because we're in quarantine because of Corona trilogy.
And the song is Soldier of Three Armies.
This is part 2 of Soldier of Three Armies. Now, as you can see, I am not in Germany at the studio because of Corona. I am at my home in Stockholm in my living room. My friend Ryan is filming me. Say hi, Ryan.
Hello.
The lighting is whatever lights we have lying around. So here we go. The Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union came to its end in March 1940. It had ended with the Finns successfully preserving their independence, but they still found themselves between a rock and a hard place. Many Finns found it hard, if not impossible, to believe that Joseph Stalin would keep his word, and that this was closer to a temporary ceasefire than a lasting peace.
I don't really understand that. Joseph Stalin seemed like a super stand-up, trustworthy guy, right? I mean, I can't think of anything crazy or terrible that he did off the top of my head.
In the West, the German war machine was on the move, taking Denmark and Norway. Sweden had kept its neutrality, but had to allow German troops transit rights through its territory. How long could Finland remain independent? In January 1941, Finnish Army Chief of Staff Erich Heinrichs visited Germany to get a clear answer. German High Command assured him that an invasion of Finland was not in their interest, but Adolf Hitler did have a role for Finland to play in a new endeavor: the invasion of the Soviet Union. Thinking that they barely had a choice, they agreed to assist the German war effort, but only under certain conditions. Finland was to be a co-belligerent, not an actual ally. It would not join the Tripartite Pact, seeing war against the Soviets as separate from World War II, and would only open hostilities to achieve Finnish interests and revenge. For the moment, this was good enough for Hitler. Lauri Törni had remained in the Finnish army after the Winter War. Word came that this new cooperation offered Finnish veterans the opportunity to train and serve in the German military. See, to many, that was reminiscent of the Great War, when Finnish volunteers had trained in the Imperial German Army, which later founded the Finnish Jäger movement. Those Jägers had served as the backbone of the victorious whites in the Finnish Civil War. Many of those veterans were now part of the higher officer corps and organized the transfer of young volunteers to do the same thing. German High Command, however, insisted that the Finns not be trained by the regular German army, but by the Waffen-SS. The Waffen-SS had evolved as the militarized arm of the regular SS, the notorious instrument of Nazi power. The Nazis saw the Waffen-SS as not only the most elite military force, but also as the bearer of Germanic and Nordic culture in concert with National Socialist ideology. So it welcomed men from the Nordic countries into its rank. Lauri Törni, now a first officer, was among the 1,400 volunteers that made their way to Germany. What motivated Törni was not Nazi ideology or the prospect of fighting for Germany. He was a soldier, not a politician nor an idealist.
And this is true for most of the outside soldiers, countries, everything, right? Like with Finland itself, it's not fighting with Germany on behalf of Nazism, right? Like that's not what this is. Even the Tripartite Pact with countries like Japan, they're not fighting on behalf of some radical Nazi world order, right? They're fighting for Japanese empire interests, right? And I feel like it gets a little bit muddy because of how terrible the Nazis were, that we incorrectly or erroneously kind of group everybody in with them that, you know, for any amount of time fought for the same aims that they fought for. And, you know, the truth is that it's way more complicated than that, right? It's like all things, that's nothing is that cut and dry. There are things, especially in wartime, where there are incredible complexities to it, that some that you can't even see now, right? There are complexities of World War I and World War II that when you study them looking back, you don't even recognize them. They get totally lost to history. But I just feel like, I don't know, there's this, especially with the Finns, there's this really, really weird connotation that they get for attacking the Soviet Union with Germany. And I feel like it is important to say that the Finns didn't jump onto the Nazi movement. And most other countries or soldiers from the outside didn't. That was not, they were interested in very specific aims apart from kind of the BS that the Germans were on.
He hated communism, he hated the Soviets who had invaded his homeland and even taken his family home, but there's no evidence that he endorsed fascism of any kind. It was for him an opportunity to train alongside what many saw as the elite of Europe, a cadre full of highly motivated and determined young men, equipped with the best weapons and trained by the best commanders. Or so he thought. He reached Germany in mid-June 1941 and was then sent to Vienna. Now wearing the death's head and the black uniform of an Untersturmführer, he began a brutal training regimen that honed his skills as a light infantry leader. But when Germany invaded the Soviet Union and Finland reopened the Northern Front against the Soviets, Törni wanted to join the fight, not for Germany, but for Finland. After 7 weeks of harsh training, his contingent was sent back to the Baltic coast to await its deployment on the Eastern Front. Now here, the stories differ. One source says that Törni was designated too problematic and sent back to Finland. Another says he smuggled himself on board a ship. Either way, by late July, Lauri Törni found himself back in Finland and immediately headed for Karelia. The Finnish army was advancing deep into Soviet Karelia, taking back the territory Finland had lost in the Winter War. Törni now joined up with the 8th Light Infantry of the 1st Division. He made good use of his Waffen-SS training and was even assigned to lead a unit of captured Soviet tanks. Soon he was seen driving far ahead, throwing grenades into the Soviet lines. The first 6 months of the Continuation War, as it would be called, went well for the Finns. Viipuri, Törni's hometown, was liberated and his family returned to their old home. By then, the Finnish army had pushed far into Soviet territory. Many hailed them as liberators from the communist yoke, but, there was also the realization that they were the aggressors now. The Germans urged them on further to close the siege of Leningrad, but Finnish Commander-in-Chief Mannerheim refused. They had advanced enough and would instead create a new defensive line. In December 1941, 2 years after fighting the Winter War, Törni once again led infiltration and reconnaissance missions deep into the enemy lines. Crossing frozen lakes and skiing through the snowy countryside, they bypassed Soviet outposts, trying to locate their supply depots instead. Törni led a team of highly skilled veterans, demolitionists, sharpshooters, hand-to-hand combat specialists. His men proudly sewed an orange T on their uniforms, identifying themselves as part of Detachment Törni. Törni himself was becoming a living legend. He was already widely respected as an unconventional but highly capable leader, and stories abounded, like how he once stumbled across a position of Soviet soldiers and killed all 30 of them with only his Suomi submachine gun. The gun, it was said, was as unpredictable as its wielder. but even the enemy knew his name. Soviet propaganda frequently broadcast that they wanted Lauri Törni dead or alive. The bounty on his head was soon raised to 3 million Finnish marks.
Same thing with Simo Häyhä, right? That seems like counterproductive propaganda from the Soviet side. Now, granted, there's a lot of things that the Soviets did not do very well. But you would think that propaganda would kind of be right up their alley. But in both cases here, with Simo Häyhä and now with this one, it's, I don't know, that seemed counterproductive. Putting these massive bounties, having these stories that are coming out about these soldiers, I feel like builds them up. It makes them almost like mythical, supernatural forces, but for the enemy, if you're the Soviets. And so, I don't know, that seems wildly counterproductive. I feel like it would be much more productive, at least for morale, to, if nothing else, just ignore them. Right? Like, they're not taking out entire fronts. Like, that's, I don't know, I just feel like singling them out, allowing stories to proliferate, putting these massive bounties out, using, huge guns to try to take them out. It just seems so like you're building them up even further to something that's not even human. I don't know, it just seems crazy.
Started out as a reserve, soon promoted well deserved, and the legend has begun. With a bounty on his head, the Red Army wants him dead. Soviet enemy number 1.
By March 1944, though, it had become pretty clear that the German army was facing collapse on the Eastern Front, and even the siege of Leningrad had been lifted. It was only a matter of time, and Finland needed a way out. For months, Finnish politicians tried to get Stalin to agree to a new peace treaty, but no dice. Now the Soviets were becoming more aggressive. The more ground the Germans lost, the more the pressure on the Finnish front increased. Then in June, Finland once more saw itself against overwhelming odds as a huge Soviet offensive began to knock the Finns out of the war. Over 10,000 pieces of Soviet artillery opened up on Finnish positions all over the Karelian Isthmus. Torni was, as always, in the thick of fighting. Moving from division to division, his unit served as a fire brigade, counterattacking the Soviets wherever they broke through. Despite irreplaceable casualties, the Finns held once more. However, this was not sustainable. But after Finnish chief diplomat in Moscow, Juho Paasikivi, openly warned that we will shoot from behind every stone and tree. We will go on shooting for 50 years. We are not Czechs. We are not Dutchmen. We will fight tooth and nail behind every rock and over the ice of every lake. The Soviets were finally willing to speak of peace, on condition that Finland would not only immediately break any relations with Germany and extradite all German personnel from Finland at once. The other conditions for peace were about as harsh as the terms after the Winter War, which we saw in Part 1. But unconditional surrender was avoided. On September 7th, the treaty was signed. Finland once more retained its independence. In the middle of all this, Lauri Törni had learned that he was to be honored as a Knight of the Mannerheim Cross for his natural and resourceful leadership during the war. This was Finland's highest military honor for valor and gallantry. Hitler, of course, took Finland's separate peace with scorn and ordered the German soldiers retreating through Lapland towards Norway to scorch the earth behind them. But this was not the end of cooperation between Finland and Germany. The Gestapo, the German secret police, was already starting a new operation called Sonderkommando Nord. This was to assist the Finnish underground that was forming among Finnish veterans. With a secret radio network and weapons deliveries, Finland was to be prepared for guerrilla operations against any Soviet takeover. And while many Finns distrusted the peace. Communist influence was growing rapidly in Finland, and Soviet agents and spies were everywhere. It seemed like only a matter of time until Finland would need its soldiers once again. Although Nazi Germany was on the verge of collapse, the Gestapo offered to train Finnish veterans for secret operations. Torni, always restless, agreed, and by the beginning of January 1945, boarded a German submarine that would take him to the secret training camp.
So this is something that's really kind of bizarre to me. The idea that the Germans used resources, and sometimes vast amounts of resources, on things that were not specifically pertinent to winning the war, right? And like that's somewhat understandable whenever you are knocking everybody in Europe out of the war. But once you're on the verge of collapse, and once you start losing in the USSR, I feel like that stuff should be over with, or at least put to the side, and you should deal with this, like deal with the war, and then you can figure out all the rest of this stuff. But I don't know, there's just I don't know if it's hubris or miscalculation or insanity or what it is, but the Germans just weirdly, even once they start losing the war and losing it badly, they don't stop all of this like ancillary stuff that really doesn't matter, especially if you're collapsing and about to lose the war. Just really strange to me. I don't really totally understand it.
From January to March, Finnish SS and German Gestapo officers taught the volunteers secret communications techniques, coding and encryption, and advanced sabotage and demolition techniques. Training, though, was interrupted by the rapid Soviet advance and was relocated to the Danish border. Torni stayed there till April, and then here again, the stories differ. One story goes that to escape the Soviets, he made contact with one of Felix Steiner's detachments that were unable to break through to Berlin and instead surrendered to the British. Later, he escaped imprisonment and made his way back to Finland. Another story goes that he grew disillusioned with the Germans and felt deceived. He then escaped the training camp and with false papers made his way through Denmark and Sweden to Finland. Again, either way, by late 1945, Torni was once again back in Finland, back in civilian life. The warrior came home, for now. But his story does not end here, for he was a soldier of 3 armies, and this was but the second.
Shout, Lauri Törni's name. A soldier of 3 armies knows the game. It's that echo from the past. Rise from beyond your grave, son of Finland and the green beret. May you rest in peace at last.
Now, this episode is a little more, I'm not going to say serious, because since all of your songs are military history, they all obviously cover serious topics of life and death. But it's a little darker, and I know it's a little more controversial because of the specific subject matter of who Lauri was fighting with. But before we talk about this, you said you've actually been to his grave, right?
Yes, I've been to Arlington. Is it once or twice? I can't remember.
Yeah, my freaking parents. I just talked to them about it. So I have been to Arlington Cemetery twice, I think. I for sure went when I was 14, 15-ish. And I think we went back when I went with my father, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. But I did not know, I didn't even know he was buried there, right? Like, I had no idea that he was buried at Arlington. And you see, when you go to Arlington, first off, it's really a kind of wild thing because, I mean, there's so many graves there. And there's so many graves of, like, pretty famous people. And so the whole thing is just one bizarre experience, right? And then you have the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and Changing of the Guard, and it just has there's a lot there. But I did not know that he was even there. But my dad, when I talked to him 2 3 days ago, said he's seen his grave at Arlington, and I was like, didn't we go to Arlington? Why was nothing said to me? But so that's a little bit annoying. But I have been to Arlington, did not see his grave. Didn't see his grave. That is super unfortunate. I wish I had, but it's just one of those things. So I'm jealous of Joachim that he saw his grave in Arlington.
Remember, actually. Well, yeah, I had to go and search in the computer to find his lot number, and man, there's a lot of graves, a lot of dead soldiers there.
Yeah. I've never actually been. You'd think it as a historian and a military historian, that'd be a place that'd be big on my bucket list, but I never.
And an American.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Now, question. Now, what they might not know, because we haven't mentioned it, it's going to be mentioned in part 3. Later in life, after the things that happened in this episode, Lauri Törni changes his name to Larry Thorne, right?
Yep.
And of course he's buried in Arlington because he did some service with America. It's not too much of a spoiler to say that he did stuff with the Americans. Does his grave say Lauri Alan Törni, or is it just Larry Thorne, or what is it?
Larry Thorne. Maybe there was something, I can't remember now, but maybe we got a clip of that.
Okay.
Somewhere.
Yeah, let's see it.
Let's see. Yeah, Larry Allen Thorne. Yeah, like I said, the whole thing in Arlington is just, it's very surreal. You don't really know how to respond. Your emotions are kind of all over the place because on one hand, you're seeing something that's like, especially historically, is like really kind of cool. And there's a whole backstory of Arlington and the land that it's on, and just there's so much to it. But then also, there are so many graves. I mean, it's just, you could walk for hours and just row after row after row. And so, yeah, it's really kind of a bizarre thing. But yeah, there it is, Larry Allen Thorne. Crazy.
Well, here we are, Larry Allen Thorne.
So is that something you or the whole band or some of the band does a lot? Like I know you visit military sites, but particularly memorials and graveyards and stuff?
Yes and no. I mean, we did a whole lot in Verdun, actually, when we were there.
Sure.
I love to see these places. It's a matter of respect,
Yeah.
especially if it's people we sung about.
Yeah.
But also, at the same time, I don't really want to do it on a show day. It's a bit of a party pooper, if you know.
Oh,
what I mean.
yeah.
But Arlington seemed, I would recommend anyone who is in the DC area to go there. I wouldn't say travel from halfway around the world to see Arlington, but if you're in the area, I'd say it's one of the bucket list things to do. Artie Murphy there, you got JFK, and
Right.
I mean, thousands upon thousands of graves.
Yep.
And the grave of the unknown soldier, which is still being watched, even though of the coronavirus. I saw actually on the news.
Yeah, the old guard, they're out there all the time, 24 hours a day. I mean, they're always there. It's really kind of crazy, but I think I had read a thing that said that they had not taken, like, that they had watched it every day, no matter what. Like, it didn't matter whether they had been in snowstorms or thunderstorms or whatever. Like, they're always out there, always on watch. It's cool. I mean, it's a cool thing.
Which is interesting is we did the the Diary of an Unknown Soldier 2 weeks ago. That episode came out, so it's pretty recent for us. So anybody out there that didn't see it, it's a pretty good episode about how the whole concept of memorializing the unknown soldier as an everyman came out. But hey, interesting point. You say you don't want to do it, when you're on tour and when it's a show day. If you have let's say you have a tour from March 1st to March 31st through South America, how many free days would you have in a 31-day? I mean, is it like only 4 or 5, or is it like 12 or 13?
That would depend. If we're on a tour bus, on a month, we would do about 22, 23, 25 shows maybe, usually.
Okay.
We do average about 5 shows per week. If we're going to do Russia or South America, it's a lot of fly shows. So, and that means the days off are also travel days. And sometimes when you travel in between, you have to connect in some main airport hubs. So there will be a bit fewer. I think 1 month in South America, we're talking 18 to 20.
Okay, well, that's cool. So yeah, you can spend 10 days looking at war memorials.
Yeah.
I'm giving everybody ideas. That's me, making them always think. That's my job in life. But hey, back to something else I wanted to ask you about. A lot of people view it as controversial that Finland fought the continuation war, not as an ally of Nazi Germany, but as a co-belligerent. Some don't, some do. It makes perfect sense to me. I mean, Soviet Union had invaded Finland. Germany was actually the only European country that had treated Finland decently in any way during the Winter War. France and England were real jerks.
Yeah, that is almost exactly how I view. I mean, literally, that is almost exactly how I view the continuation war. Is what Indy said there. I mean, they're in a no-win situation. They did everything they could not to tie themselves to Germany whenever they get involved in the war against the Soviet Union. Like, I agree with Indy there.
If you go to my World War II channel and follow the Winter War, you'll see that the people that were supposed to be supporting them failed to support them. But I understand also because it is Nazi Germany, it is Adolf Hitler's Germany, and people say, how can you ally yourself to such monsters? Although it wasn't entirely apparent until after the invasion of the Soviet Union what monsters they actually were. But what do you say about that?
Well, in a sense, it doesn't really matter because we're storytellers, not commentators on these things. I mean, we're not doing this to spread any propaganda to say what's right or wrong. We want to tell the most interesting stories from the point of view we find the most interesting. And in this case, I would have to say Lauri Törni really qualifies because, what he did in his life as a soldier really qualifies him to be,
especially the stuff this week, the stuff that we heard about today. We were like going to Germany and getting trained and not being in the Germans not having them trained by the army, but by the Waffen SS. And it gets weird. I think this episode is definitely going to inspire people to dig around and dig a little deeper into it. Let's save the rest of the stuff we have to say about Lauri Törni or Larry Thorne until part 3 of, what's the name of this song?
Soldier of 3 Armies.
See you next time.
Take care.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you so much for the support with the community. All the Patreons, everyone who's helping, sharing this. We really love doing this, and thanks to you, we can keep on doing it. So keep on doing what you do, and we will keep on doing what we do. Thank you.
Oh, that was a lot calmer than the outro for the last one. That was a really great one. Sabaton History. Part 2, the continuation war for Soldier of 3 Armies. I'll continue this series. Hopefully tomorrow. I'm not entirely sure. I definitely am going to get another Sabaton song out from the new album, but I'll get it done as quickly as I can. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Help me keep building the channel over here. I'll put the link to the Discord down below. If anybody wants to join, they can click on there and continue these conversations over on the Discord. But with all that being said, I'll see you all next time.